Hey gang, Jim Bowers, Demon Seed, back at you here, and we are doing a live Google Hangout where we're going to answer some questions that I've always wanted to know. So I got two of the smartest people in the drone industry as far as I'm concerned, and we're just going to discuss it. We might have the answers, we might not. Who knows? I'm going to let my two guests introduce themselves. We'll start with Christina.
Of course you would start with me. Hi, my name's Christina Ng. I'm the COO and co-founder of UAS Solutions Group. We're a small women's veterans-owned company who pretty much focuses on bridging the gap between the FAA and industry. We used to be, all of us used to be FAA employees. Dave Morton just recently retired out of the office, so we're glad to have him on board to become pretty much the public experts on putting together public programs. And my quick background is I'm a Black Hawk helicopter pilot and unmanned aircraft brigade advisor for the Army.
There we go. Over to you, Jonathan.
Yes, I'm an attorney. I practice in the aviation law field, specifically focusing on unmanned aircraft. I've written some books on unmanned aircraft. One of them is being published by the American Bar Association right now. My background is that I was a commercial pilot, and I still have 2 active flight instructor certificates, so I come with a manned aviation background to this unmanned sector.
Outstanding. All right, we're going to dive right into it here. I just want to talk about mainly drone pilots' rights. I mean, basically, we know what the FAA guidelines are, and a lot of guys out there know what their local laws are in their particular community, but I get questions asked to me all the time, and I've even run into it myself, where I didn't know what the answer was to whether or not I might be doing something illegal or what the definition of some of these guidelines are. So the first thing I want to throw out there to you guys, and maybe you can answer this, is let's say you're a drone pilot, you're out in your local park, you're flying around, and let's say you fly beyond the park and you're just cruising around, and a private citizen walks up to you and says, "You are doing this illegally and you flew over my property and I want your tail number right now." How do you respond to that as a drone pilot? What do you have to volunteer?
So I have to say, Jonathan and I had talked about this before, and each state and county and city, they all have their own laws with regards to this. And the first thing you have to ask yourself, were you even authorized to fly in that park in the first place? The second question is, are you public, are you commercial, are you civil, are you hobby and recreation? And so to be able to give just a broad answer on a very not broad question is very difficult for the audience that you have. You have people all the way from Alaska to Hawaii, probably down to Puerto Rico, right? And so to answer something like that, you have to, each case is going to be different. And Jonathan and I talked about this before about the citizen's arrest, and I'll let him, as the lawyer, talk a little bit more about that with the felony and everything that's involved with that. But each case is different, and you have to start at the beginning. Like I said, were you authorized to fly in the park? What were you doing? Did you have a certificate of authorization or waiver? Are you operating under Section 333 exemption? Are you with the swarm network and you have prior authorization? So I don't think this is a cut and dry yes and no question.
Well, let me ask you then, Jonathan, if a non-law enforcement person walks up and says, "I want your tail number," are you obligated to provide that to a non-police officer, let's say, or FBI, so on?
What do you mean by FBI? Because I mean, law enforcement under the regulations is incredibly broad. You know, federal, state, local, all of those things are kind of in this law enforcement category. So if you're outside of that and you're not anywhere in there, then you're just a private citizen. You don't have to tell them what's going on. But think about it. Why are they asking? Hey, be friendly with them. Be professional. If you're out there dressing like a professional, as opposed to like these professionals, when the hat turns sideways and stuff like that. You might be able to alleviate a lot of their fears, also educate them as well, so that they don't call the cops on you, and then law enforcement does show up, and then we have some more problems. So I think going to just talking to them, why are you concerned? What's the problem? Oh, I don't want this flying here. And hey, why don't you come over here and you can see my screen? I can't really actually see much. I'm over here taking some photos of this beautiful sunrise or sunset or something like that. And they're like, oh, that's really that's a really good idea. Just dialogue with them, be an ambassador on behalf of the drone industry, as opposed to a jerk and I'm gonna assert my rights. And okay, you just gave you just reaffirmed everybody's
preconceived ideas,
feelings of the rogueness. Yeah,
so,
the rogueness.
If this private citizen or security guard or whatever just is completely unreasonable and says, I'm going to report you to the FAA, I want your tail number, what are you obligated to give them? Nothing? Or do you have to provide your name, address, and tail number?
See, that brings up a really interesting issue, because security guards aren't generally considered law enforcement, and it's going to be you're going to have to look at that at a state-by-state basis. At least in Florida, they don't consider them in the same category as a law enforcement, just an individual. So outside of Florida, I can't say. Once again, it's going to have to go back to, you're going to want to find a local attorney that can actually speak to you what your state, local, county laws are, so you can actually get a right understanding of this. This isn't just jump on the Facebook group and ask somebody some questions. That's stupid. That's really stupid.
Okay. All right.
Well, and another question, I do have to say one thing. If you're not doing anything wrong, then why are you so upset with giving somebody your name and your tail number?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I mean, maybe not your tail number, because then they can get more information from you. But say, hey, here's my email address. Here's my name and my email address. Here's my business card. Right. Maybe you want some photography done later on. But if you're not doing anything wrong, then why are you so afraid to give out your name and phone number, or your name and email address for them to get in touch with you?
Well,
or ask for theirs.
A lot of times these, let's say, private individuals think that you're doing something wrong. Let's say you're flying and you pass over at 200, 300 feet private property. Now, you're still in the national airspace and you have a right to fly there, but this person thinks that he owns the airspace above his property. A lot of people have that notion. You hear about it all the time. You fly over my property, I'm going to shoot you down.
Well, just know your laws and regulations for every time you go to fly, and if you're not in the wrong, then like they say, innocent men don't run. You like that, Jonathan?
Yeah. Well, generally, innocent people don't run. There is a suspicion when you act like that. Now, at the same time, I think people can, invite a lot of problems by just taking that aggressive nature. Just back it up and try to be, I don't know if you remember the A-Team, or remember Face, how he was just very suave and slick with dealing with the problem guys. You need to be Face Man and actually deal with them. Hey, how's it going? What are your concerns? Why don't you tell me? Oh, that is really interesting. I've never thought of that before. Chat with them, find out what's going on, as opposed to being all aggressive. I think that's really the big problem there. In addition to the whole idea of who owns the airspace, I'm actually reading a book right now, particularly on that topic, on who owns the national. So,
I hope if that's God, he leaves a message. I'm just saying. I really do.
Whoever it is, I'm just trying to hang up on him.
I'm actually reading a book right now on who owns airspace, because this is a long-going historical problem that hasn't been fully addressed yet. We have the Cosby case, which pretty much said up into the immediately enveloping reaches of the atmosphere, whatever that nebulous term means, that a property owner, he owns that airspace. And so if you're flying over 200 feet, is that the property owner's airspace? We don't fully know. That hasn't been fully clarified. So it's interesting if he's going to try to assert that against you, but then it would be really stupid for you to constantly rely upon that, especially since it has not been fully settled.
Interesting. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next question, and that is, The deadline for registering your drone has come and gone. I think it was February the 19th.
Yeah.
For those out there who may have either forgotten or decided, I'm not registering my damn drone, I don't care what the FAA tells me, if they get busted, what's the penalty?
Christine,
I didn't see that in the I didn't see that in the questions. Let me go into Google and take a quick look.
I'll take that one. You can actually get fined civilly by the FAA $27,500, and if they really want to come after you, they can come after you criminally for up to 3 years in prison and or a $250,000 fine. It's a Class E felony under the federal statutes.
Wow. And that's just for not paying your $5 and getting tail number and sticking it on all your drones. That's the potential for penalty is prison and almost 30 grand.
Well, not only that, but had you just registered in the first place, it was free. So it wasn't even $5 to begin with. I mean, it was free. And then it was up to you to decide whether or not you put that registration number on your aircraft once they figured everything out. So
for those that haven't registered yet that are out there, and I registered mine like 3 or 4 weeks ago, but if somebody's out there that hasn't registered and he's thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do now? What if he registers now? Are they going to say, well, you're too late, buddy?
No. You just have to register it. You just have to register it before you fly, and unless they can really prove, careless intent and that you had flown previously, it's not that big of a deal. It's better just to go ahead and register it now than to continue to break that law.
Gotcha.
Look serious,
it's
Jonathan.
also prior to operation out.
Yeah.
It's also prior to operation outside. So if you aren't planning on operating the drone at all, it doesn't have to be registered. So if you sit it, have it in the back of your closet somewhere, like I have my Phantom 2 Vision Plus sitting in a case. I'm not flying at the moment, so I'm not going to actually go out and register it. I'm actually involved in the lawsuit right now, challenging that in the D.C. Circuit. So I'm not going to register it until I actually get an answer from the D.C. Circuit that we have to register or not. I think that we have actually a pretty good chance actually at winning at that point. But outside, you have to register, and it has to be operational. So if you carry it outside, that's fine. If you're going to operate only indoors, like in a basketball gym or inside your house, you don't have to register.
And that brings up another question I wanted to ask you, Jonathan, is the FAA doesn't allow any commercial use of a drone unless you have a 333 and a private pilot's license, et cetera, et cetera. Can you charge commercially indoors, or is that also illegal?
Well, it's primarily considered not the national airspace, which is what the FAA has jurisdiction over. You own what's inside your house. So if you're going to operate in there, that's outside of the FAA's jurisdiction. Therefore, they can't come after you. And I would love to see them try making that assertion. And so the weird, iffy part is what happens when you operate in a netted environment, such as, I don't know if you saw, Kansas State has a giant netted environment where you can operate drones. Is that considered, in the national airspace, or is that indoors? That hasn't been fully clarified, but you can make an interesting argument that it is not the national airspace since it's not leaving and no aircraft's coming in.
Yeah, the one that I love is a lot of these baseball or football stadiums have retractable domes. And so if the dome is closed, it's inside and it's not under the FAA jurisdiction. It's not considered the national airspace. But that same area, as soon as they open up that dome and it's no longer fully enclosed inside, then the question becomes who owns that airspace, and is it national? Is it a part of the NAS?
Right. So as long as it's exposed to straight up, then you're in the national airspace. But I mean, if you're in a stadium, you've got these gigantic, walls all the way around the stadium, and if you stayed underneath the top of those bleachers, no aircraft or anything is going to be in danger inside of that area. So
this is what I have to say to that. We have delivered homecoming basketballs to a football field at a stadium before. We've also delivered game balls at local high school stadiums. landed a Black Hawk helicopter on a football field and given the game ball to start the game.
I see.
Delivered the game ball with a helicopter.
Yep. So
National Guard.
That brings it right into the national airspace then.
Right into the national airspace.
Now, who imposes fines? Can state, like if the state says you cannot fly in that park over there, and Johnny Law comes up and says the sign says you can't fly here, can the state impose an immediate fine on you, $1,500 for flying a drone here? Can they regulate the national airspace like that?
Well, LA Municipal Code
the
did,
national
right?
airspace.
You know?
Well, there's a difference between what is legal and lawful for them to do and what they can do. Just like if I tell my daughter, don't do that, and she does that, well, she has the ability to do something. However, I told her not to, and she was disobeying authority. Same thing with a lot of these small towns, counties, cities, municipalities that are passing the laws because they're trying to protect the privacy of their citizens or the safety of the people on the ground. It's good intention, but it's completely illegal. Most of them, because they are regulating the national airspace who can operate. Now it gets interesting with the ones that, like National Park Service, would say you cannot take off or launch from the ground. They don't actually try to regulate the airspace. They only try to regulate the ground. That gets into a trickier area of how do you regulate that, and how does it interact with the city of Burbank case from 1973 with the United States Supreme Court? Don't fully know.
So it sounds like it would probably, I mean, if you contested it, it would end up as a court case or something along that line. If it was a state or local or city or whatever saying you now owe us $500 because you violated X law.
Right, exactly, because I don't know how long it's going to take before this actually gets to having like a federal district court or a federal appeals court actually answer it, because what happens with criminal law is primarily like about 95% of criminal cases are actually just settled. They don't go to trial. So you have the prosecutor that's going to intake the cases. They're going to say, what in the world is this? They don't even file the charges, okay? So the guy gets arrested, but that's the end of it. No charges get filed. Then you also have the judges, which are going to look at it and be like, what is this? Get this out of here. Maybe a defense attorney or PD says, hey, motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. You guys don't have any way whatsoever to regulate this. So after getting past all those hoops, then you would have to have somebody willing to fight it out with a county to actually get some, or a state or municipality to actually get some good case law. So it's just kind of evade, I think, some good fighting out in court for a little while, just by the nature of a lot of these criminal, how they tend to plea out in the criminal courts.
Okay. All right. And my next question, if somebody does have a 333 and pilot's license, in order to fly commercially, Christina, you might know the answer to this, are they required to carry insurance with a 333?
Oh, so that's a really good question. So right now, there's no law that requires them to carry insurance. And one of the things that we talk about with Part 107 is, I only made 2 comments to Part 107. And the gentleman who wrote Part 107, Lance Knuckles, he comes from an insurance background. And one of the things that I commented on Part 107 that I noticed was that insurance was not mandated. Okay, and I thought that insurance should be mandated, and he said that the FAA does not mandate insurance on unmanned aircraft. Now, there are other things that possibly require you to have insurance. I'm not completely sure what that is. I think that it's the same as having a vehicle, right? Some states you have to have car insurance. Some states you don't have to have car insurance. Some states, that's why you carry car insurance for I forget what it's called, where if the other driver doesn't have car insurance, that your car insurance will pick that up. So it's sort of the same concept with that. However, you have to remember, if you don't have insurance and you're found at fault, they can come after all of your personal. They can come after your home. They can come after your car. They can come after your accounts. They can come after everything else that you have. And part of being a responsible unmanned aircraft operator in this whole industry is to do what's right, and part of that is you're going to want to have insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it mandated by law? I don't believe it is. Jonathan, do you know that answer? It might be under insurance law for each state is different.
Well, that brings up a really good question regarding what if there's a state law somehow requirement. I do not know of anything regarding that because it's primarily a preemptive issue. The field preemption applies to aviation where the states really aren't allowed to regulate so many areas. I at least know that drones, from everything I've read, aren't required to have any type of insurance. However, under at least two of the bills that were recently introduced into Congress, two of them were requiring insurance of some sort on the unmanned aircraft, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Hmm.
And the other thing I did hear recently, I was at a aviation conference, and they had some insurance personnel there, and homeowners policies used to cover unmanned aircraft because they were more like the RC hobbyists, and a lot of homeowners policies are starting to drop that portion out of their policies. So if anybody's listening to this and you're flying an unmanned aircraft in your backyard even for hobby and rec or for commercial purposes, you definitely want to check your homeowners insurance to determine whether or not that's covered, because they are dropping unmanned aircraft off of those insurance policies.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, a lot of guys are telling me that they looked into their homeowners insurance and called their agent, and they were insured under their homeowners, and they didn't even know they were to begin with. But it sounds like these homeowners insurance companies are starting to get rid of that coverage.
They are, and it depends on what happens. So, for instance, if your unmanned aircraft goes through the window of your neighbor's house, you might be covered, whereas if your unmanned aircraft goes through your own window, you're not covered. So you have to contact your homeowner's policy to determine what exactly are you covered under, and are you covered if you do go to that park and you fly somewhere, away from your residence. So those are questions that you're going to have to really ask your insurance agent.
Okay, I want to bounce back just for a second here to a question I forgot to ask you, and that's on these tail numbers, the FAA tail number that you get when you register your drone. What are the requirements on that number? Now, I've got guys telling me that they're going to put it inside their battery compartment in like a 4-point font on the back wall or on the end of their battery. Are there specific requirements as far as the size and where you have to put that number? Jonathan?
Yeah, it has to be accessible. Yeah, there's an accessibility. It requires that it has to be readily accessible, and it specifically said regarding if you had like a battery compartment that you could easily get to, that was fine. But you had to get to it, not play hide and go seek with the officer. And mess it up. It has to be, I believe, readily accessible and also legible. You have to be able to figure that out.
I see. Yeah, because a friend of mine said that he didn't want to make his on the outside or too easily accessible in case he had a flyaway and the drone went, 6 miles down range and crashed in the middle of the road. He didn't want his number out there. He just wants it, thrown away or whatever. He doesn't want that potential liability. So that's why he was going to put his on the inside of his aircraft, and he was going to make it really tiny, which brought up the question, how tiny is too tiny?
Well, the FAA website's pretty clear. It says you must mark the registration number on your UAS by some means that is legible and allows the number to be readily seen. The registration number may be placed in a battery compartment as long as it can be accessed without the use of tools.
Ah, I see.
There you go. So a lot of these questions can, the FAA's got a FAQ page. You can get a lot of these answers from.
All right. And Jonathan, I know you know the answer to this next one is if Johnny Pilot out there somewhere, his business associate says, I want you just to fly around the building and get some pictures for me, and he does it, and the guy gives him $200 and, he calls it good. They end up posting it on YouTube. What's the penalty if the FAA spots that video on YouTube and then goes and finds out he did not have commercial 333, etc.? What are they going to do to you?
Okay, so that sounds like some of these phone calls I get actually. Anyways, so how it would happen is I'm like, hey, did that guy talk to you? Well, what can happen is the inspector, the local FSDO inspector he's gonna probably start fishing around to figure out from just that video what in the world are you shooting to find out who was the owner. He can make some phone calls, start asking around, hey, was there a guy shooting a drone around here? Hey, what's his name? His name is Bob. Hey, what's his last name? You got any more intel on him? Okay, great. So they start sniffing around. They go back eventually and find who actually did it. If the individual is a non-licensed pilot, then you're going to have a fine, normally about at least it's like $1,100 per regulation violation. If you are a licensed pilot, you can have a business. It depends on exactly what. It's a business. You can get up to $11,000 per violation. If you're the licensed guy, he can actually get his pilot's license suspended or revoked in addition to getting fined on top of that. So, I mean, you can get a whole bunch of things if they really want to come after you. And the Skypan situation was people want to know why in the world did he get like 1.9 million, how quickly did that happen? Well, if you fly your drone, because it's considered an aircraft, therefore you have to comply with the federal aviation regulations. There's multiple regulations that you need to get exempted from. Okay, and if you don't, then those are going to be the same ones that the FAA is going to copy and paste over onto the order of enforcement that they then use to come after you. So you're going to be flying an aircraft that's without an airworthiness certificate. You're an unlicensed pilot. Oh, it's unregistered. Oh, you went out and registered your aircraft? Oh, we'll just take that one off the list, but we'll still have 2 other ones on the list. Oh, did you fly in near an airport? Okay, so were you properly entering and exiting the pattern? Oh, what about being over a certain height from the ground? If you're a fixed winger, 500 feet or 1,000 over the highest obstacle, if it's a congested area, do you have a transponder on you? Oh, you do or don't? Yeah, there's a lot of interesting questions that get raised, and the FAA is just going to go through the regulations and check them off, and then take those and put those over on the order of enforcement. And you're going to probably break around 5 to 6 regulations every single flight, so you're looking at least $55, $60, $600 at a minimum, probably every time you fly. So when you land it, pull the battery, put another one in, boom, bunch more. So.
Do I have you back?
There you go. I just sent you a text.
Oh,
what happened? You dropped off. No, you're fine.
What happened?
No,
I scared
know.
him. He ran away.
Froze up, so I quit out of Safari and everything else, and it opened up some bandwidth, I think.
There you go.
It froze up right about the time, Jonathan, you were explaining. Where were we when it froze up? You were in the middle of.
I heard everything just fine.
Yeah, I heard everything just fine as well. So it might have just been you, but it still kept saying live on my end.
Yeah, mine too.
Did you hear me when I was saying I've lost you and you froze and all that? Was that still audible?
No.
All right. Well, let's just move on to our next question, and that is, anywhere in the United States, what happens if somebody out there says, there is a drone hovering over my house, and my wife is in her bikini out there sunbathing, and he shoots down your drone directly over his property? Who's at fault? Who's right? Who's wrong? Legally.
Well, we did think we were going to have case law with that there for a while, right? And then it kind of fizzled out. They settled out of court. Well, they kind of gave in on that. What would you say, Jonathan? The case down there by you.
That case. Which one? There's been multiple shootings going on around the U.S. that I know about. People find their drones getting shot. I mean, the big one that most people refer to, I think, is the Kentucky one. The Meredith v. Boggs setup thing. Meredith was getting prosecuted for shooting his gun off, and then that ended up going away. Well, now Boggs is challenging that in the it's actually in a United States District Court case right now, federal district court, actually trying to get a declaratory action from the judge determining where is navigable airspace, where does that descend down to? Because if it descends down to the blade of grass on the ground, then Boggs could fly around up above all he wants, and even though the bikini lady is right down here, he has perfect right to do that, just like walking out on a sidewalk and somebody decided to sunbathe right next to the sidewalk. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a highway in the sky. So that's going to have major implications going forward. Now, while it's just a federal district court in Kentucky, that doesn't really matter. That in the grand scheme, it's going to start getting the ball rolling where people are going to start asking more and more questions.
And the other thing I have to remind you of is to me, there's a difference between just flying over and flying over with a camera on board the aircraft, right? So if you're just flying and you can't take any photos and you're just flying the aircraft, that is a little bit different than if you're flying over somebody's property and you're taking photos, you're taking video, you can see what's going on, because then you start looking into other local county laws, ordinances, such as peeping Tom laws, privacy laws, trespassing laws. So that's one of the things that you have to differentiate is what were you actually doing? Were you just flying an aircraft, period? Or were you flying an aircraft that could take videos for somebody who has a reasonable expectation of privacy?
I see. Okay, so they might not necessarily be breaking a law, but there might be a civil penalty for invasion of privacy or something like that on behalf of the bikini wearer?
Well, that hasn't been fully answered, though. I mean, I think the one common thread through a lot of these questions you ask is just like, we don't know. It's all over the place, and it hasn't been settled. It's like shaking up a snow globe. It's just, I don't know, we got to let it settle for a while, get some answers, because it's all over the place. Because there's a difference between a legal answer and using wisdom and how it might shake out, So you want to exercise wisdom here because there's not a lot of case law or guidance I can really give you in these areas. So you mouth off to a police officer, that might not go so well with you because you're going to say something along the lines like, well, the FAA gives me a right to fly here and blah, blah, blah. And then he's going to say, hey, you were operating in a careless and reckless manner, and we're going to charge you under New York law and arrest you, just like the Zabudowski case and the multiple cases in New York.
You've got a tail light out.
Oh, they'll get you.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I'm like, oh yeah, it's gonna be great. Like as soon as you take that and walk away, he'll just like follow you. And then what? You're gonna, I guess, grab an Uber at that point, because if you get in your car, it's not gonna go.
Right. Which brings me, I mean, you can take that a step further. I love to fly on the beach. I like to shoot sunsets on the beach, and in the sand and the dunes and the seagulls and all that. Some terrific video opportunities there. But there are also people on the beach that have that, what Christine would call a reasonable expectation of privacy. Where is the line drawn for the guy who wants to go out there? He has a legal right, am I correct, as far as photographing people that are on a public beach?
Well, there's also paparazzi laws. I know out there in Malibu, they've had those for a long, long time. And so once again, you have to look at, like I said before, there's a camera and there's an aircraft. And so it's kind of like we have three different laws. We have the camera laws, the aviation laws, and then the flying with a camera law, right?
Ah.
So you have to. So it's not just about can I fly and take photos. You have to first ask yourself, what are the laws for me being able to take photos in the first place? And if you guys have paparazzi laws, then whether you have it whether you're taking photos while you're standing there or you put it up on a drone, you're still under paparazzi laws.
Right, and they just recently passed that law in California. Senator, I can't remember her name. She's taken two shots at it, and they passed her latest
Feinstein
bill through the Senate, and it became law in California, from what I understand, and it is now in the state of California illegal to fly over private property, or if a private property owner does catch you, I guess, they can file a civil claim against you for damages. That's the way I understand it anyway. Does that sound right, Jonathan?
I mean, I know that there was a whole bunch of fighting going on regarding the California bill, but I thought that was, well, at least at the state level, was thrown out. I don't know if there's something new that came about. The problem is it's becoming difficult to try to play whack-a-mole with these regulations that are popping up left and right with the FAA. Then we have the states messing around, and then below that you have like the counties, cities, towns, and they're all monkeying around. And by the time you actually find out, it's you know, like the city of LA ordinance, all of a sudden the FAA, not the FAA, but the police officer starts showing up asking some questions, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Doing a Scooby-Doo on a...
It was Hannah Beth Jackson's, Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, and her first bill, it said you couldn't fly over private property below 300 feet. That one was thrown out by the governor right at the end. Then she passed another one, which, from what I gather, went into law, and the way they pushed it through was as a paparazzi law, and that was to protect, you know, the stars and the rich and famous against these photographers that would fly, you know, 80 feet over their walls or in Malibu and take pictures of their private wedding, etc., etc. And that's the way they got it pushed through. But with this new law, they didn't even put an altitude limit in it. You can't fly over private property even if you're 900, 1,500 feet off the ground, which puts you in violation with the FAA anyway. So there's not even a corridor that you can pass through, according to this new law anyway.
Yeah, I'm looking at a couple
I've never,
of California laws here.
Well, I mean, in Florida, I can tell you we have a law that was passed where they trying to protect the privacy of people. Where if you take a picture of an individual on their property or of their property that is not visible from eye level, like on the ground, and if you take it with a drone, then they have an actual right to sue. It's a private cause of action. They can actually get an injunction, damages, and attorney's fees for that. And punitive damages if it's actually bad enough. Now, will that actually be able to hold up if there's a challenge? Don't really know, but some poor person's going to have to find that out.
Yeah, so that all kind of comes down to deep pockets and whether or not you can afford an attorney to fight an action like that, right? Because if Joe Pilot out there is making, $1,500 a month at Taco Bell, chances are he's going to go down for it.
Right. Well, going back to just being a pilot, pre-flight planning. So before you jump into this area, you might want to start asking people or get a professional to actually answer your questions as opposed to running to Facebook and doing the El Cheapo style. I mean, really, you're going to go to Facebook and ask questions? Like, that's the best, like, are you going to be sitting and reflect upon that when you're in jail or whatever happens and goes, that was a really great idea. I'm really happy that I went on Facebook. No.
It's so funny.
No, you're going to be like, there's going to be someone else like sitting there like, you did what? You relied on somebody said, Facebook, and like that's like almost as bad as believing the numbers they say on the used car ads on Craigslist. Like, are you one of those people? Because I mean, like, really, like that's dangerous. That's really dangerous.
I agree. And here's only
60,000 miles.
Here's the thing with manned aviation. Before every flight, wherever you leave, wherever you take off, and you're going to land, you have to make sure, that the runway that you're landing on is going to support the weight of your aircraft, that they're going to have the right jet fuel that's going to be there, that there isn't a TFR up, that the hours of operation are good, that you're going to be able to follow your flight plan, that there's all these things that go in with aviation, right? It's aviation. And so don't skimp just because your aircraft is smaller. You need to do, you need to play this responsible role the same as the rest of us aviators have for so long. Don't try to skirt the rules and the laws because your aircraft just happens to be smaller. You need to realize that you're in aviation now.
Right.
I mean, you're in aviation now. Just own it.
I'd like to have the final closing statement from each of you. If you want to throw something against the wall, where do you see the drone industry 4 years from now? Is it going to survive? Is there going to be a drone in every pot? Or is it going to get regulated to death where maybe only one in 5,000 people can afford to own one because of the insurance requirements and all that sort of thing? Where do you see it headed, Jonathan?
I see that it's going to be more regulated. Primarily, there's one reason why that Part 48 lawsuit that I'm involved in with the Taylor case is so important is that it stands for the point of whether or not the FAA can keep their hands off of model aircraft. So they're going to continue to try to regulate that area. You might have some type of recreational model pilot license, similar to like a ham license. That's a potentiality that might come about due to either some type of terrorist activity or maybe some really bad news, not taking out an airliner, because I don't think it will, but it'll hit one and it'll scare everyone half to death, and the thing will get past some sort of pilot license to educate people. So I think there'll be a catalyst, there'll be an event that'll catalyze the thing to be more and more regulated. FCC as well as the TSA are most likely also going to start getting involved into the area, because they're going to start waking up and realizing that they have control over this turf in certain areas, and maybe even the FTC working with the FAA. So I see there's three other agencies that are sitting on the sidelines that haven't really jumped into this area yet, and everyone's worrying about the FAA. And I'm like, I think the FAA is the one that we kind of would like, and it's also really good and beneficial to have the FAA and working with them and having them saying that they control the aircraft all the way to the blade of grass, because it's better to deal with one FAA than a bunch of states that know nothing about aviation monkeying around like little King Georges and requiring things left and right that they have no business to talk about.
So what you're saying then is the FAA is actually our advocate as opposed to the NAS and the CIA and all the other people that sort of play into this down the road.
Right. I see the FAA as being, it would help us out on realizing that they're more of a friend. I know that it's very annoying having this Part 48 registration set up, but it would be better to have Part 48, them at least asserting that. I'm not saying I like that. I'm just saying for purposes of practicality here, having them asserting jurisdiction over us to then tell the cities, towns, counties, municipalities, stop it, knock it off. These people have a right to fly their drone out at a park. Stop with this banning of drone flying altogether. Stop with the penalties and the arrests. People don't need to be harassed like this. Right.
And Christina, where do you see it headed?
Well, I agree with pretty much everything that Jonathan said. I think, federal preemption. And federal preemption will basically say that the FAA has overall jurisdiction from the blade of grass up to, infinity and beyond, however, wherever we want to put that out at. There are organizations that will get involved with this that already are involved that people don't realize. NTIA is one. OMB is another one. OMB has a huge voice. Don't underestimate the power of them. We love FPV racing, and if we love FPV racing and we think that there's a lot of money to be had in that, then of course the FCC. You have to look at the FCC licensing with that. Where do I see it in 4 years? I think that there's going to be two things that will happen. I think that everybody who just wants to get involved with it now and skirt the rules and not get their licenses are going to have a harder time in 4 years, because there will be even more rules in place and regulations. And the people who don't want to play by those rules and regulations today, they're not going to want to play by those rules and regulations in 4 years. So I think in 4 years it's going to turn away from being this sexy new shiny toy to being an actual business case model, and you have to have an actual business model in order for you to survive. One of the things that we notice is with the exemptions, when you price an exemption down to $50, it's not a business model. You can't continue to grow your business with a $50 exemption. So those companies are going to have to figure out a business model. They're going to have to read a business book. You're going to have to go to business school, and you're going to have to really figure out how to build this business. And the other thing is, there's a lot of venture capitalist money sitting out there, and a lot of those a lot of those checks were written, and people are going to have to pay up. And it's going to be interesting how far the companies who have given seed and startup money, at which point do they finally back away and say, you guys just have to collapse, or we're not going to make it, or you have to merge with somebody else.
So are you saying then that you think that the hobby side of it is going to fade and it's going to become more of a commercial application? Let's say.
I think we're still going to have the hobby side. We're still going to have the hobby side, of course, because when people think of hobby, what people fail to realize when they think of hobby is everybody thinks of the DJI Phantom as being hobby. Like, I get my little thing for Father's Day, my aircraft for Father's Day, and I go in my backyard and I play with it. That is not true in the heart of what hobby and recreation is. Hobby and recreation is about building these scale replica P-3 warbirds and outflying these amazing aircraft that are 1/100th scale at fly-ins. That is really hobby and rec, and we have to differentiate between those guys, those men and women, and the person who gets a drone for Father's Day.
Off the shelf.
There's a difference between the hobby and rec, I think, in between the two.
Yeah, I see.
I'm going to get hate mail. I know it.
I can see it coming. I can see that coming. All right, Jonathan, you got any closing remarks, or if somebody needs to get a hold of you desperately, where can I point them to?
Sure, they can go to my website at www.jruprechtlaw.com, and that's spelled Juliet, Romeo, Uniform, Papa, Papa, Romeo, Echo, Charlie, Hotel, Tango, Lima, Alpha, Whiskey.com.
Yeah, like I'm going to remember that.
Okay, we'll put it in the show notes, right?
I'm surprised you remember it. And you're also writing a book, right, Jonathan?
I've done 2 books. I've just done a drone logbook that's 333 COA compliant, also FAR compliant. I have 4 more in the works. So yeah.
Can they buy them on Amazon?
I've been doing a lot of writing.
Can they look up your
2 of them you can buy on Amazon. 1 of them you can buy on the American Bar Association's website.
And what were those titles one more time?
One's called, the first one that I did was Drones, Their Many Civilian Uses and the U.S. Laws Surrounding Them. That book was originally designed to be kind of like a textbook, has 402 footnotes. Then I did the Drone Operator's Logbook. Both of those are available on Amazon.
Okay. And Christina, you are doing UAS Solutions, and you provide guidance and give me a rundown. What all does UAS Solutions offer out there, and how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so UAS Solutions, we focus pretty much, I do have to say we really like the public sector entities because of Dave Morton. However, because we have the legal side of the house, fixed wing, rotary wing, air traffic control, military background, FAA backgrounds, DOJ backgrounds, we basically are able to answer your questions that are unmanned aircraft related. We build entire programs. We build all of your training programs, your SMS programs, your SOPs, maintenance manuals if your aircraft doesn't come with them, like if it's a home built. If you're a public entity, we build your program from the ground up because that's what Dave Morton did while he was at the FAA. So, we're fortunate that we have him as the expert. But you can find us at uasolutionsgroup.com. That is uasolutionsgroup.com. I will not phonetically spell that. But to contact me, it's christina.ing@uasolutionsgroup.com.
And that's NGH, correct?
ENGH. Christina with a CH .ENGH at uasolutionsgroup.com.
All right. Super. Well, thanks, you guys. I appreciate you joining me. I know we've been trying to do this for the last, week and a half. And we've been bouncing all over the place playing tag. So, once again, hey, I do need to put the word out there. I want to congratulate and thank Ewan Ramsey for taking the lead over at the Swarm Network, and Swarm stands for Search with an Aerial RC Multirotor, and they are over 5,000 volunteer drone pilots that assist families with missing persons, and I'm sure Ewan's going to do a great job with it, him and his second in command, Ken Simpson. So thanks once again, you guys, and let's do it again sometime.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
All right, and I'm gonna stop broadcast.